Right and live. Okay. All right, let's close our eyes together. What a great turnout. So happy to see everyone. Everybody's bringing their energetic presence to the Sangha, wherever they are in the room, or they're joining us from somewhere else. I think we'll just start with a little quantum breath meditation. And so just begin by noticing the ebb and the flow of your own breath. And then begin to notice the passage of breath moving just beyond the nostrils as you draw the breath in. And then as you exhale, allow your lips to part slightly, and as if you're blowing through a small straw. Follow the exhalation all the way to the end. Breathing in through the nostrils, just a soft, light, passive inhalation. Allow the breath to swirl through the back of the throat. And as you exhale, it's as if you're blowing through a small straw. Concentrated, pointed, steady stream of breath. Now continue on your own in this way. And as you breathe in, notice how there's a natural pause at the top of the inhalation. And just as you begin to exhale, again, your attention is following the exhalation all the way to the end. And you might even notice a pause at the end of the exhalation. Just before the breath comes back in. Slow, steady inhalation. Slow, steady exhalation. All of your attention on the breath. Noticing the natural pause at the top of the inhalation. And the natural pause at the end of the exhalation. And with each exhalation, allow that stream of breath to become softer, longer, until it's almost imperceptible. And notice how, as the breath becomes almost imperceptible, there's also a dissolving of attention and a rise into spaciousness. Allow your attention to rest on the third eye at each pause. Allow yourself to merge into oneness. That natural state of meditation where everything else arises and falls, where all experiences come into and fall away from. And so if what we want in the end must be present in the beginning, we'll start with the integrative intention, or the prayer of intention, the Asatama chant. And so slowly allow your hands to rise up and either place them in prayer position at the heart or one palm on top of the other at the heart center. And you're free to join in or simply allow the reverberation of the mantra to penetrate into the energy body and go beyond the mind, drawing you inward towards the truth of who you really are. And as you're ready, you may open your eyes. Jai Bhagwan, welcome.
Jai Bhagwan.
Jai Bhagwan. Jai Bhagwan. And Jai Bhagwan. So good. So did Leslie share with you anything about what satsang is? Or she just said, come along?
She shared a little bit.
Okay. Okay,
She
good.
said it was meditation, asking questions,
Great.
and looking for answers.
Okay, super. Good. Well, I'm impressed with the turnout tonight because I didn't know if anyone was going to come because of the date confusion. So I'm very happy to be here. And I did bring a reading. So shall we start with the reading? And then hopefully you brought some questions. I'm hoping. Okay. So this is from Gurdjieff's Love and Bliss. And this book really reads, it's a poetry book, really. But it's also, the whole thing could be a yoga nidra. And so with this this book, there is a CD that comes with it, or you can purchase in collaboration with it. And it's Gurdjieff reading every single poem in here that he wrote. So years ago, Gurdjieff said to me, he said, I want you to take this book and begin to read from it in the classes and teach on it. This was years ago. So this afternoon when I was wondering, what am I flipping through the books? I didn't have a big inspiration for this week. And so I thought, what is it that I'm gonna, what's calling tonight? And there was nothing. And I thought, well, hopefully they come with questions. And then this book just kind of went, but wait, there's this book. Pick me, pick me. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. So I don't have one selected, so I'm just going to open and see where we fall. And there you go, which is interesting because in the past 300-hour teacher training, we actually were focusing on the edge quite a bit. So what this says is, when the challenges of life bring you to your toleration point, you have arrived at a crossroad where either ego appears or the witness happens. This is the frontier where you choose fight or flight, or you embrace the experience where there is neither fight nor flight. The window of opening is willingness to face what is as it is. It is entering the experience unconditionally, feeling all that is present without judgment, interpretation, guilt, shame, or blame. This is the point of tapas, the spiritual fire that burns everything you have been preserving as yourself. This is a painful journey. It means giving up all that you have adopted to protect your self-image, which lives under the protection of unconscious habits and instincts. As the mask of the ego burns, the self is revealed. The witness neutralizes the power struggle between the self-image and the self. The witness reveals the all-encompassing nature of the self, which absorbs the conflicting forces of duality, taking them to the other side and transforming them into the integrative force of unity and ecstasy. Mm-hmm. Would you like me to break that down a little bit more for you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when the challenge of life brings you to the toleration point, so what is the toleration point?
The edge.
The edge. The edge. So you have arrived at a crossroad. So for those of you that know the edge, do you recall the picture that we pointed to on the weekend? What did it look like? That intersection point.
A cross.
A cross. And intersection is like a crossroad, right? So it was literally a crossroad, okay? Literally a crossing point, an intersection. So when you've arrived at a crossroad where either the ego appears, okay, or the witness happens, do you recall at that crossroad where there's that what's it called? What was the terminology we used for that?
Right in the middle?
Yeah.
Apex?
The intersection point. What happens? Our tendency to
React.
Intersects with our ability to relax.
Yeah, exactly. That crossroad is our tendency to contract meets our ability to relax. And do you recall that there was a hot spot right in the middle of that, and then there was that was the polarity. Do you recall that? There was a hot spot in the middle, the crossroads or the intersection, and then there was a little polarity where it's talking about that right here. It says, this is the frontier. That's that polarity. It's like these two pieces, these two parallel lines almost. And if you move towards that ability to relax, but you go kind of too much in that direction, we kind of we're not engaged, right? And if you go too close to the tendency to contract, then we're in that fight or flight response. So it says, this is the frontier where you choose fight or flight, or you embrace the experience where there is neither fight or flight. So if you go to that tendency to contract and you actually lean into that a little bit more, that's when we go into fight or flight. And fight or flight is the ego's protective mechanism to keep us alive, right? Does that make sense? Or you embrace the experience where there is neither fight or flight. So what is that? That's what the next question is. What is that experience where there is neither fight or flight?
Acceptance.
Acceptance is that's perfect. That's it, acceptance. The window of opening is the willingness to face what is as it is. That's it. That's right. That's perfect. It is entering the experience unconditionally. So you've heard me say being open under more conditions with less conditions. That's Gurdjieff says that actually. Chandrakant says that. Being open under more conditions with less conditions. So we're feeling all that is present without judgment, interpretation, guilt, shame, or blame. So are we feeling the feelings, or are we just feeling the feeling?
We're feeling the sensation,
Mm-hmm.
but also, I like to call it hanging back,
Hanging back's good.
and just allowing, that wave, right?
Mm-hmm.
To allow it to rise and ride it.
Mm-hmm.
You can jump off if you want, or you can ride the wave. So, that's the thing, is that we feel that we're that sensation, but we can also witness it as a witness consciousness.
Absolutely. So, and then do you recall when I spoke about there's a difference between feeling and feelings? So feelings are attached to a dialogue, like a thought, right? So I feel guilty, I feel shame, I feel blame, I'm judging. All of those things are actually part of feelings, where feeling is just pure sensation. Yeah, pure sensation. And just coming back, so if feeling is pure sensation, then another word for that would be energy. Right? Another word would be energy. And so energy is actually manifest, because it has a form of some sort, manifest consciousness. Right? Go ahead.
Is that why, boil people down with a question about, they might say what they're feeling, what their feelings are.
Mm-hmm.
But then beyond that, because it can have judgment associated with it, but where you're feeling that in your body, right, which is more the sensation.
Right.
So moving beyond the mind.
Exactly.
Aspect of it to what the sensation is.
Exactly. So, what if I heard you correctly? You're asking if some folks will talk about their feelings, and then I might, or you might, ask them, tell me where you're feeling that in your body, and then it immediately takes them away from the feelings, which tend to be from a past memory or a projection of the future. So that fight or flight response, right, takes them out of that fight or flight response, brings them right into the moment, and allows them to be present with the feeling and the sensation in the body, as well as witnessing what's happening. Almost immediately it happens that way. Yeah. It's beautiful. So then they come right into feeling energy in the body, which is manifest consciousness. So this point where we actually experience unconditionally, this point of tapas, that's the point of tapas. So that's the spiritual fire that burns everything you have been preserving as yourself. So when we kind of sit in that crossroad, in that intersection, that polarity, and we accept what it is as it is, we're burning tapas. And tapas are the all those perceived beliefs, ideals, opinions, preferences, distinctions, all those things that are bound to, or as we've heard it called like shellac, or it's kind of attached to our sense of self. And this is a painful journey. It means giving up all that you've adopted to protect your self-image, right? All of the patterns, all of the habits, all of the everything, even from the clothing, right? From the job, from the maybe who we got married to, or the house that we live in, all of these things that, that are external or internal, that we've adopted to protect our self-image of who we believe we are, which lives under the protection of unconscious instincts. What is that? The unconscious instincts.
Patterns, like from when you're like learn patterns from when you're a kid, your reactions, ego,
Biology.
Biology.
Mm-hmm.
Biology, exactly. It's biology. And so we have within us, so the ego is actually part of our biology. You can't get rid of it. You can't kill it or any of that, right? It's like, it's part of who we are. It's part of who we are. We need that because it will actually sustain our life. That's its job. So that's our instinct to stay alive. So, but with that, as you know, we've spoken about like paper tigers. So with that, there's an idea that if we have a sense of something is threatening our self-image, then our biology kicks in to protect us, right? So I can't think of an example right now. Maybe you can think of an example for yourself of what that might look like. But maybe, you know, when we get concerned about money, or we get concerned about maybe we have to move house, right? And we feel like, oh, that's a huge threat to our existence. Or something like someone we love, you know, like our children grow up and they move out of the house, for example. You know, that threat of, or we lose somebody, and that threat of that life change is such a big experience that we are afraid for our own existence. So then we go on to kind of like a co-pilot, where we start acting in that fight or flight response to keep us alive. When the truth is, there is no real threat to our own existence. It's a perceived threat. Does that make sense?
Here's one. It's like you're at work, you put your lunch in the morning, you go to get your lunch at lunch, and someone's moved it. And it's just like,
right. Where's my food?
Where's my food? My coworkers.
Yeah, where's
really,
my
it
food?
seems really minor, but it like can easily grow. I don't know.
Can easily grow.
It just, those kind of things.
And it got you right in the abdomen.
Oh, totally.
Stealing your food.
Or they take your mug.
That's another
Don't
thing.
take your mug.
Don't take my mug. Or don't take my mug with the coffee in it. That's for sure. So as the mask of so once we get to see these biological patterns that happen, right? We get to start to see, oh, that's an instinct, a biological pattern of my ego protecting my self-image so that I remain alive in the experience of perceiving this paper tiger, which actually I think is a real tiger, but it's not. So these biological instincts take over. So then as we allow ourselves just to remain in that kind of that toleration point, and we allow the fire of the tapas to burn us, then we actually notice that the mask of the ego, that self-image, starts to burn away. And I know we've all had that experience where maybe we experienced a divorce, or maybe we experienced the loss of someone, or maybe we had a loss of a job, or something like that, where we did feel our self-image being burned away, right? So those are those big pivotal moments in life where we can't not face them, we can't not be in them, but those little things happen all the time where when we meet those toleration points, we can actually stay there and just let that burn. I'll give you an example for me. A couple nights ago, something was happening in my house, and my tendency would be to get up and try to manage and control the situation. And what I did is I said, okay. And I just actually stayed in the fire of that propensity to want to go do something to change it and make it be different than it was, even though I knew anything I said or did wasn't going to affect the outcome. But for some reason, there was a propensity in me to want to make a difference or make that change. So instead of going out, I actually stayed. I closed my eyes and I stayed in that sensation, in that feeling, and I felt the fire and watched it start to dissolve. That mask of the ego, the self-image of what I believed needed to be a certain way. Is that making sense for you? Okay. So when that happens, then the self, the true self, is revealed. And the witness neutralizes the power struggle between the self-image and the self. So then we're at that polarity, and we could move quickly into duality if we started getting into a little bit of conflict between I like this, I don't like this. But as we remain that kind of resting back, or what did you say, April? Hanging back?
Hanging back, yeah.
The hanging back. If we continue that hanging back, just kind of watching the fire burn, watching even that propensity to make a change arise and fall away, watching those biological instincts kind of rise up, then through that, the self-image and the self begin to, that becomes less of a disturbance. It begins to become neutralized. So the witness then reveals the all-encompassing nature of the self. That seer, the knower, the knowing awareness, the divine source, right? Which absorbs the conflicting forces of duality. So basically duality is that unconscious instinct that happens. That's when I like this, I don't like this, fight or flight. And when we remain steady in that witness, even though there is a vibration of energy maybe happening, but we don't run and we don't collapse into it. We just kind of ride that wave. We kind of hang out at that crossroad. Then that polarity absorbs the duality. Do you see? It actually begins to alter that duality into a polarity because we're not choosing for or against. Gurudev calls it choiceless awareness. So we're actually resting as witness, watching. That is a choice in itself, but it's a choice coming from not the ego self-image, but coming from the true self, from that eternal truth. So then, when the conflicting forces of duality are absorbed, we're then taken to the other side and transformed into this integrative force of unity and ecstasy, which means that that polarity absorbs that duality, and then it becomes that sense of unity, that oneness, where we're not choosing for or against, we're actually, everything is in, nothing is out, we're completely embraced in everything. And so we're at that edge, which at the beginning was like, that's our toleration point. How long can I stay here? To, wow, I'm in total bliss. And I haven't moved or nothing has changed. I'm still at my toleration point, but how I am with it has totally shifted. And so it's no longer disturbance, but it's actually total bliss. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was just one page. That was page 18 for anyone that wants to know that. Yeah. So on this, there's just a little low power mode. So I'm just going to push the low power mode on. If for some reason we lose you guys, we're sorry. I forgot to charge the phone. But we'll still save it and download it if we can. Okay. So let's just sit with that for a moment, that toleration point, and how it can easily, just simply through resting at that crossroads, can move from being edgy to being bliss. Breath, attention, feeling sensation, and witnessing, not giving it to the mind, and just burning the mask of the ego. Jai Gurudev. So what questions do we have tonight?
I'm curious about how, because I recognize this can apply to various aspects of life, but on the mat, in a pose, where does the resting back change to, when you think about, we talk about in a pose where, say like tree, like that people aren't going to the point beyond their edge where they're struggling and fighting for breath. But then neither do we want to be where it's just so blasé and boring that you're not challenging yourself, that your mind starts going. So when I think of resting back, I think of like, sort of like,
Right.
not engaging.
Right.
So it's going to be up to, not going beyond the edge, but resting at the edge, but not coming so far back that, so as an example, if I'm teaching, I remind people, like, if you feel this is just not challenging you at all, do something else. Like try closing your eyes or something to challenge, not go beyond an edge, but also don't want the pendulum to swing the other way where when I'm just bored and my mind starts going somewhere else.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand the idea of resting back and where you rest, observe, but not become bored.
Laissez-faire.
Yeah.
Right. So trying to understand that idea of resting back, where you're still engaged, but not laissez-faire or not unengaged, or disassociated or detached.
Right. Yeah.
So imagine that you're going, you're offering. I'll just actually not even teaching, but let's come back to just you. So you're moving into a yoga posture. What's one of your most challenging basic postures that you find your tendency to struggle comes in?
Dancer is coming to mind.
Okay, so dancer, right? So as we move into dancer, what do you notice for yourself typically? What shows up?
I feel like my hips go out of alignment and I let the leg come up too far. I keep trying to pull it back into alignment and
Okay.
stay balanced.
Okay, so you find that your leg, your hips kind of splay out, your leg goes back a little bit too far. And
Out to the side.
Out to the
More
side.
out to the side.
And then you try to
straight
bring
back.
yourself back so your hips are more level,
Right, yes.
and then try to, and then extending out through the back of the leg. Okay. So the reason I'm asking you that is because we can't really be clear on what's happening for someone else, but when we're talking with each other, we can be a little bit more clear for you, and then I can guide you in that. So then from that experience, you can move into offering that to others. So what I would suggest is that as you're moving through dancer, there's a point where you can feel that edge or that toleration point, and you know that if you actually back up too much, that you're not engaged. Can you feel that?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know that if you go too far forward into that trying to get somewhere, that you're really like over engaged and probably have defensive tensions and maybe a little bit of struggle going on,
Sure.
trying to shallow breath, just that. Mental intensity,
Frustration.
okay, frustration. So between those two places, that not engaging and being too engaged, there is a bandwidth. There's a bandwidth between those two places. And so resting back is not necessarily physically resting back. It's actually witnessing that front of the bandwidth, for example, when you're at this front edge, and witnessing this back edge, right? And that bandwidth between. So where is that hottest spot between those two where you feel like you can be engaged and still at ease? And so then that resting back is then more it's almost like you're watching a movie and you're paying attention to the sensations and you're adjusting yourself enough so that your mental faculties are not kind of driving, right? That you're resting back enough that there's a softer quality about the thought process, enough so that you can actually rest in that witness observer. in that knowing presence. So you still might be in quite an extended dancer pose. However, you're not grasping onto something and you're not dropping it. You're in that bandwidth. Does that make sense to you? And so then with that experience for yourself, then you can offer to your students, you know, those stages that we do when we move into dancer, stage 1, stage 2, that kind of thing. And so that it's little steps so that they can see where they tend to go past their edge and where they tend to collapse back into being kind of laissez-faire, right? So finding that place where they're engaged and at ease. Yeah. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Okay, good. Because you're right, that terminology of resting back almost feels like a little bit of giving up or something. And it's not that. It's actually letting the mind take a back seat. It's more about the mind taking a back seat and being still fully engaged in the body, but the mind actually is taking a back seat. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Bandwidth is like what you were talking about in the cross before. That's space between the intersection.
Yes.
Around the intersection.
Yes. And in the meditation of motion, so with posture of consciousness, we're at that intersection, right? And we basically, with posture of consciousness, we're just staying kind of right on that hot spot, and we're not really moving. There's no micro movements. There's no playing, you know, the front edge, the back edge. We're just kind of staying right in that center. As we move to meditation of motion, then we begin to play with that bandwidth a little bit, because it's there if you can recognize that tube that we draw where, you know, undigested life experiences come through and they get blocked. So that block is actually where that bandwidth is within that edge or that toleration point. And then we play a little bit on the front and the back edge of that. And then whatever might be blocked or stuck or undigested, we begin to tease it out, right? We begin to tease it out. And so then it's almost like, it's like a clogged drain. And we're like pulling the hair out just gently and tenderly. You know, you can't rip it out, right? Because it's all clogged in there. So it's just like gently pulling, and then eventually the water begins to flow, or the energy begins to flow through that drain again, through that pipe, through that tube. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. What else?
I have an observation.
Observation. Let's hear it.
Okay. So just going back to what you were saying about there's a situation going on. I recognize in myself, I like to manage and control. I like to be helpful. But I realized in wanting to be helpful, there's that I think it's a yama where it's the non-stealing. And so if I know that the person is completely fine, they can figure it out by themselves by me stepping in and wanting to be helpful and manage and control the situation because I know better, my way's the best, whatever. I realize that that's actually a stealing away from them of their opportunity. Because a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a few months ago, it was the chakras, right? Where that the third piece in that is like that takes away the opportunity for that person to self-actualize, right? Like to become realized. And it's just so interesting to me because I just think that, you know, when I do things, I do them so well, and that, like, you know, but I realize that if I don't allow the other person, you know, you probably know who I'm talking about, my kids, but, you know, you know, if I don't allow them to experience it for themselves, like, if they want help, I'm there, but if they don't need it, like, the tendency to still, and then just rest back. So I liked how, I don't know, I just came to this realization that, like, when I do that, and I saw it in other situations too, with the work that I do, it's just like, okay, well, when people are always trying to manage and control other people and their lives, and the loving, they do it from a place of love, but it's actually, like, you're stealing the other person's opportunity for self-growth, and and so it was just like kind of like one of those moments for me where like it's kind of like lately I've been thinking of those tumbler locks, like those Chinese locking cabinets, like where you finally find the right keyhole, and then all of a sudden everything just goes and it all either opens, all the drawers start opening, and it's just like anyway, so that was my observation lately, and it was not one big like aha, it was kind of like it just kept repeating, and it was just like, oh, and then I just started to see it more in like a kind of a circular spiral pattern, and it's just like, okay, so anyway, it's still, a challenge to rest back and hang back and, just let people do what they need to do. But anyway, at least I have that sort of understanding that I can work that now. So I thought that was pretty cool for me anyway.
It's great because you can see how your outplay, potentially could affect the others, but also that outplay isn't coming from your true self. It's still coming from your self-image of, I'm a mom, this is my job, I want to make sure that it does this way, or I know the right way, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that's, again, that unconscious biological instinct that, okay, we can't get rid of it, but we can actually, the more we witness that propensity, the less second key. It's a second key, is what it is.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
For those of you that know the second key is that disturbance that arises and falls, that kind of creates that startle effect. And within 60 to 90 seconds, if we don't, it's our first reaction. Sure. It comes and it goes if we allow it to go, if we use it to be free. Mm-hmm. So that's the chitta prana exercise, right? Mm-hmm. So that you're pointing to is that biological, unconscious instinct to manage and control, take care of people, that self-image that's also wrapped up in being a mom, right? And so that's just a second key. Mm-hmm. So when you see it rise, and you go, like I did the other night, and I just went, I'm just going to sit here and breathe right here. And it dissipated. So that then, whatever's happening over here, this outplay of this other person, they may or may not become actualized because we did or didn't do something. But we actually become closer to that actualization. Which that's the most important piece.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because ultimately, this is for the evolution of this body-mind complex, this soul, right? Not for that one or that one, but for this one. And the more we attend to that, then naturally it's going to have an effect on those around us. Very potent, powerful effect. Mm-hmm. So that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yay!
I'll ponder that a little deeper.
You ponder that now. Okay.
I know during the Dashram on Sunday, Gurdjieff said that preferences come from attachments and addictions. I didn't quite understand what he was pointing to with that. It was clear as day when the other yogi that was there, Nirali was there. It was crystal clear what she explained. Mm-hmm. And what I heard for her saying was, if you purify your body and mind, you make clearer choices that are pointing to your truth. Mm-hmm. And that was clear as day. But I didn't understand where Gurdjieff was coming. It kind of seemed like two answers, but I didn't understand the preferences coming from attachments and addictions. I'm lost there.
Okay. So from what I understood, first of all, Nirali kind of backed up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And what she was pointing to is that the more we are clean and clear, the more clean and clear we can know what the truth is, right? That is prana speaking to us. Go this way, psst, over here, right? So the more purified we are, the more clean and clear we are, the more clearly we can hear, right? So that's what she's pointing to. And then Gurudev is pointing to, with the sword, basically, preferences are addictions, and what else did he say?
Attachments.
Attachments and addictions. So when you say, I don't like this, most of us are coming from that habitual, unconscious self-image. Most of us are coming from that place. When we purify ourselves through yoga techniques and tools and practices, through witnessing, beginning to watch that reactive perceiver, we begin to see where those preferences are coming from and what they're pointing to. So he's saying that preferences are coming from that unconscious self-image, that kind of biological, instinctive self-image that's part of our makeup, and that's not who we are. So if we say that I like this and I don't like this, who's saying that?
Me.
You're saying that, and it's all of your reactive patterns or your contracted sense of self that has been carried from the time of those undigested experiences that you either don't want to participate or you want it to be different. Classic example. Someone I know has the relationship with their father. Their father is someone who embellishes everything, okay? And the son does the opposite. So they don't embellish everything, they actually do the opposite. They kind of downplay everything. So this son is not wanting to be like the father and is unconscious of that. So they've created a pattern that actually is downplaying everything. So therefore they don't feel very much, right? Does it make sense to you? So, but until they realize what they're doing to themselves by not feeling, and they realize the pendulum swing, the reactive pattern to their parent, that's an unconscious attachment, basically. I don't want to be like that. That's an attachment, which creates an addiction, which is a compulsion that happens over and over and over and over and over again. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when it's considered an addiction, there's no other option. We always go that direction. So when we're addicted to cigarettes or alcohol or ice cream, it's that constant, we can't say no, we have to do everything we can at all costs to get that. So in our outplays of our personalities, for that example, it's the same thing. The person that this man will never embellish because they've created everything in their life to not be like that. Do you see? Where it's possible, I don't know, but the father, possibly they're embellishing everything because maybe they were never heard and they figured if they, then they'll be heard. Do you know what I mean? So you can see how that can carry through generations completely unconsciously, but that becomes attachments and addictions that we don't even know about. Is that helpful?
That is, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
See
when
the other side of the story, because one hit home, the other one was where'd that come from?
Right.
Thank you.
So for yourself, let's say there was a pattern in you that was, you're very loving, right? Very loving, always giving, always giving, always giving, right? Okay. And so that is coming from a truth of who you are. But there was a time when that was unconscious. Do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very much so. Thank you.
What else?
Is that Rag and Navesh? Attraction and
Yeah.
repulsion? Aversion.
Yep, it is. Rag and Devesh. So anytime you choose for or against, it's Rag and Devesh. It's like, I don't want this. I want that. And that is always coming from that egoic self-image. Okay. When it's like, for me, it's like when it's an absolute yes, without any hesitation, with any doubt, with any questioning, that is coming from that truth, that clarity. Okay. When it's coming from a place of, I think I want this, or I think I want that, or we go back and forth, then that's not clear, and that's not the answer. So wait, just wait. And it will either reveal itself, or it'll fall away. Like at that to-do list, right? Mm-hmm.
So I want to give space for others to participate, but I have another question.
Ask away, ask away.
Well, no one's going to speak up, but I mean, I'm trying to give space.
It's all good, because every question is helpful to every person.
So when I hear comments about like, who is that? And we'll say things like, well, that's me. And then we talk about, being the self. And I know we talk sometimes about the big S self. So there's a tendency to see the dual aspects of who we are. I heard in a podcast this week it described as saying that it's more optimal that we realize that we are infinite with a body rather than a body with an infinite self. But there's two aspects of us. So there's the divine self, and then there is the ego, the body, this corporeal form that we're in, that will one day turn to dust. So there's kind of those two aspects of us, and Mickey Singer refers to it in the Surrender Experiment about, the moment on the couch when he realized he heard this chatter in mind going, and he said, "Who is that talking?" And he realized, well, there's two aspects of us, right? And the Yoga Sutras, it's still the modifications of the mind so that we can know our true essence. And like you said earlier, we're not trying to kill the ego. It's an important aspect of who we are in this form to sustain our being. So I sometimes maybe feel uncertainty about when we're talking about self, is about using the term small s self, big s self.
Right.
Like the different aspects of it.
Right.
So, terminology can sometimes be a little, I don't want to say confusing, but at any rate, I guess a question would be recognizing we have aspects of us that, pharmacy, you've got to know what day you're working next week or whatever. So there's certain things where you have to be thinking about the future, which takes us away from being present in the moment. Right? So it's trying to integrate all of this reality with remaining in the moment and realizing, well, you can't wake up if you're due at the office on Tuesday at night and say, "Oh my God, I'll go now. This is the moment now." So we sort of do some planning as well.
Right.
Where's that balance? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So if I hear you correctly, it's like, how do we live in the world?
Yeah.
And follow through with the tasks that we need to do.
Yeah.
And still have a sense of ourself, our big self, or a true self in all of that.
Yeah.
Because we need the ego self-image to actually keep us alive, right? And so what Gurudev would say is, just do the next thing. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? So maybe the next thing is writing a list of all the days that I have to go to work, or all the tasks that I have. That might be the next thing. And then once you do that, then what is the next thing after that? Maybe the first thing on that list is the next thing. Maybe it's time to do the dishes. Maybe it's time to feed the house. Maybe it's time to take out the garbage, or maybe it's time to go to bed, right? So whatever the next thing is, we just do that. And that way we're not getting kind of we're not getting consumed by this long list of things that we have to do over the next, month, 2 months, 3 months, the 5-year plan, all of that, right? We're not getting consumed by that. It's just what's the next thing? It's time for me to write a list of for the things I'd like to attain in the next 5 years. Okay, done. What's the next thing? Right? Oh, time for bed. Okay, what's the next thing? Oh, time to wake up. Just like that. So then it just kind of takes it from being this big, sometimes overwhelming experience of projections to this moment.
So it's a little bit being mindful.
Yeah.
Right? We should be present. Like when we think about being mindful when we're eating, about one bite at a time, not like, oh, when I'm done this, I have to do
Exactly.
else. It's I'm eating at the moment, so
Exactly.
concentrating on that bite
Exactly.
until you're done,
And
now
then,
it's time to clean the dishes.
right, exactly. Just like that.
Yeah, totally.
Just like that. Just like that.
Yeah, so I think it's related to being mindful, like you're brushing the teeth. Just
Exactly.
Instead of like, okay, actually, while I'm brushing my teeth, I'm doing other things. So, which is representational of thinking of.
You're not the only one in the room that does that, brushing your teeth while multitasking. I mean,
So, sometimes that's indicative of trying to do 50 things on the list,
absolutely.
right? Rather than focus on the task at hand.
The brushing of teeth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the mind's propensity is to reach out there. That is the propensity of the mind. That is its natural, instinctive, fight or flight, right? What's happening next? Where do I need to go? Where's the food? That kind of thing. Like that's that natural propensity of mind. And so we are training the mind. We're training the mind so that it's actually listening to the true self and not just running away on its own. It's actually being directed, adjusted, kind of carried and guided so that it's actually serving us and we're not serving it. Does that make sense?
Did you call it the next thing? Did you say Gerda calls it the next thing?
What's the next thing?
What's the next thing?
What's the next thing?
Just that.
Yeah, just that. So the next moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was in the Kapalo book
Mhm.
about if you have the flashlight and you're in a dark forest, if you just shine it, you can walk those 4 steps.
Absolutely.
And then the shine of the flashlight and walk the next 4 steps.
That's
It's kind of
right.
the same thing.
Exactly.
And on a larger scale, it sort of addresses things like, let's say you're planning a trip to India.
Uh-huh.
The next thing is to write what is the plan. And the next thing is to, make sure I have my passport number. And the
Exactly.
next thing is to book the airline ticket.
Exactly.
So it's not like, oh my God, how are we going to get there? This is too much.
Exactly.
You need elephant one bite at a time, as the saying goes.
Yes, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Don't eat any elephants.
Don't. No. But,
We're vegan.
but yeah, no, that's very useful because it still allows the opportunity to say,
Keep
I'm
going.
not ignoring the future.
Yeah.
There's things that have to be done, but I'm taking care of the future in this moment now. It's the next
Exactly.
thing on the list or whatever. Oh, good.
Exactly.
Okay, it's helpful. Very helpful.
And then you can take the list, even though you plan the list out, it's going to change and be at
Right.
peace that you have to switch things and
Sure,
change things
sure.
and change your steps and your bites and the flashlight and the elephant and everything and just be okay to drop it away and reset and
good
go
point,
with another
good point.
list. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
It drops away or you drop it and reset.
Yeah.
We can always reset. What were you going to say?
Well, it's energetic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What did you say?
It's energetic.
Mhm. Yeah. That energetic reset. Mhm. Mm.
I keep, just an observation, I keep thinking I have a question, then I keep just going back to, okay, well, am I in witness? Am I present? And I can almost always answer my question. So
Beautiful.
So I'm finding it difficult right now to bring something up. But one thing that does kind of coming from the back is, and I think John kind of touched on it a little bit, is I've noticed occasionally, like, for example, after I read The Power of Now, or after I spend like a lot of time in meditation, I feel a detachment from the ego world, right? And which on one hand is
Can you describe that a little bit more, that detachment from the ego world?
where I don't have preference anymore, like things that egoically I could consider bad. So say for example, if you take the surrender experiment and you take the lightness and the darkness in the same light, and if you take that to like extremes that make you uncomfortable to think about, like say if something bad happened to my children, that concept means that I have to accept that as that I should have no preference on whether or not something bad happens to my kids. And because the universe, like it all, like there's pain and there's pleasure, and it's just the ego that prefers pleasure. It's just the ego that prefers my children are happy and healthy. The universal me, the true self, knows that those are just, those are temporary manifestations of energy, right? So when you start diving into some of these truths, when you take them to these extreme conclusions, sometimes it's like you start to go, well, I don't care if I lose my job, and I don't care if I'm broke on the street, because, what an interesting experiment that would be, or like, or there's, and even like little things, like when I'm driving, sometimes I just feel like I'm like not even really in my car, and I'm just like floating down the road, and it's like, wow, somebody could totally just like T-bone me right now. What would that be like? And and then I sometimes feel like I have to back away from my practice so that I can re-engage in the ego world, because it kind of scares me a little. So I guess, that's kind of what keeps coming up for me, and I don't know how to put that in a succinct question.
It's actually what you described is not an
You don't want to miss the answers on Satsang, you have to come to Satsang.
That's the thing.
Is part of that though worrying about a future that will most likely not occur? Shitty things happen to everyone. And some of us in here, having lost a spouse, where people say, "Oh my God, I don't know how I wouldn't be able to handle that." Well, you just do it. Like when a shitty thing happens.
Yeah.
Like, so I know other people, when they think about, "Oh my God, I lost my spouse, I couldn't cope."
That's all
Well, you just do
projection.
it. You
That's
just-
all projection.
You're not given a choice. This is what happened.
This
You
is what
just-
life is.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or is helpful at all, but it's you just imagine terrible things happening. That's just the mind playing tricks on
It's
you.
just imagination.
The likelihood of it happening is 1 in a million.
And it doesn't even matter.
So,
It's just imagination.
right.
It's not happening now. Okay. So just to kind of touch on that, I know when my parents passed and my sister, and I'm sure when your partners or people that you love were sick, right? And that projection of how am I going to get through this? How am I going to be with this? Right? That they haven't passed away yet, but there's this anticipation in the future of what you're going to be like. And then if you look at how you are now on the other side of that, could you ever have imagined that you would be where you are? Could you ever imagine that? So we can't even imagine, right? Even if we think we can imagine, we can't even imagine. Because it's never going to be what we think it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, we spend
We spend so much time thinking about it. When I was in high school, I was thinking about my parents dying all the time.
Our society too is so pushes it on us.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're so inundated that no wonder it's so hard.
Yeah, everything is supporting that projection. Everything supports that
Kindergarten,
story.
it's like,
Hmm. Yeah, everything. Many of the self-help groups are all like, tell me your story, tell me where you came from, and let's figure out where you're going. And it's all of that. So instead of actually just being here now, it's always about the past and the future as opposed to what's happening right now. Right? And again, that's just that intersection. That's all we're talking about, is being here now at that intersection. Yeah.
So on a smaller scale,
Mhm.
I've had something percolating in
Yeah.
my mind, and it's related very much to this operating the past, operating the future, and it sort of relates to create trouble in relationships by saying, so this is what happened with us in the past, and I see that happening again in the future, so I need to, we need to discuss this. That doesn't go over so well. It on the one hand, okay, so I've done trials where I thought, okay, I have a sense something's going to happen in this situation. It's not going to turn out well. I'm not going to push hard on this because I got in trouble last time where we had a disagreement. So I let it go, and nothing happens. So I'm trying to find the balance between trusting my intuition. Okay, if I use an actual example, it's like we talk about energy. If I start having a sense, like sometimes if there's a plate left on the edge of the table, I'm like, I feel like I'm living the moment that thing's falling on the ground. So I'm like, we need to move this in. I've done trials where I'm like, okay, I'm not doing it this time, and sure enough, it happens. And so I'm like, and we've all had experiences where we're like, damn it, I didn't listen to my intuition. So now, and I think some of us have talked about this, I'm like, if my intuition is that, so building our house, we had discussions where I pushed months ago, I'm like, we need to take care of this now. And it got pushed back, and I'm like, okay, I'll let it go. And of course it came to fruition. And so I use that opportunity to just say, in the future, when I feel very strongly about something, when in that moment, I'm having an intuitive hit that we need to do this right now, I need you just to buy it. And I got that agreement. But it's because I'm preaching to the choir here. Who hasn't had the experience when you think, oh, I knew I should have done something, you didn't do it and you regret it.
Mm-hmm.
So not trusting your intuition.
So let me back up for just a second, because so trusting your intuition, that's your center of influence, right? So you can listen to what you believe is your prompting of intuition, or if we're clear and purified, that would be your truth, right? Which is what Nirali was pointing to. So you can listen to that intuition. You can speak what is coming out based on that prompt. Do you have any influence on the other parties that you might be speaking to? No. So that is that intersection where the tendency to contract, oh my God, if we don't do it this way, then it's going to happen again, to I can relax. I feel that tendency to contract. Can I still relax? Because I spoke what was accurate for me. And now the other person has their own experience. Maybe they have an instinct, maybe they have an intuition, maybe they're not even in that ballpark thinking about that at all because they're concentrating on something else and they're not even thinking about the future. And so your center of influence is just speaking the truth as the true self, right? And I would always say check. I would say start to check. So when you're speaking your truth, Is it your preference? Is it your belief? Is it your identification? Is it your distinction? Okay, check it out for yourself before it comes out of your mouth, if you can. And then if it's not, if it's actually, this is like, it's something in my gut,
Yeah.
go directly to the feeling, not the feelings. Go directly to the feeling and sit with that feeling. Maybe it's actually telling you something completely different, right? That you can't even see because the propensity of mind is saying it's this. So sit with that feeling, and then if it's there and you check in with that feeling, it's like, yeah, I'm afraid. I'm afraid this is going to happen again. That's the nugget. And so tell me more about that. I'm afraid this is going to happen again and we're going to lose money, for example. Or it's going to create tension between us. I don't like when there's tension between us. I feel small when there's tension between us. I feel I'm not heard when there's tension between us. I remember when I was very young and I didn't feel heard in my family, and how that felt. I wasn't seen, I wasn't heard. I didn't feel important. You see how I'm peeling that back?
Precisely.
So I'm peeling that back to that moment when I was a little person and I didn't feel heard, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel valued, I didn't feel important. And actually, that is really what I'm feeling in this moment, again. And my perception is that if I just get the agreement of that person over there to say they won't ever not listen to my intuition again, then I won't have to feel this anymore, right? I won't have to feel this anymore. Do you see? I won't have to feel this anymore because I don't want to feel that way. But remember, even feeling that, I don't feel heard, I don't feel seen, I don't feel important enough, that happened decades ago. And it's bubbling up as what's happening now. Is that true? I ask myself, is that true right now? Is that true right now? And often it's not. Often it's that patterned, regurgitated, programmed past that's showing up as something, but it's actually the weed of I'm not valued, I'm not important enough, I'm not seen, I'm not heard. And when I recognize, is that actually what's happening? Well, I communicated what was important for me, so I'm seeing me, I'm hearing me, I'm valuing me. Therefore, it's not accurate. I can't control what happens out there, but I totally have the truth of what's right for me right now happening. So that in itself will free us from any projection about what may or may not happen, because we're tending to ourselves in the moment, as the moment, now, and now, and now. But you kind of have to peel it back, and that's what Nirali was pointing to, that purification. Like, you have to know what's at the root of it. And it's not usually what we think is at the root. So we have to peel it back. Because it's never about what's going on out there, right? So then in that moment of wanting to manage and control that situation, it was taking you away from what was really happening inside of you. So it wasn't coming from an empowered place.
So there's different scenarios. That certainly makes sense a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned about the concert, when I had that sense of leave now.
It was an absolute yes,
that
right?
Was that's that clarity.
Yeah.
And there's one, I'm speaking specifically incident about the house where I knew in that moment, I'm like, I have to push this, and I didn't. I backed off, and it did end up costing us later on.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, okay, when I feel that, I'm pushing. Like I'm going to do what I need to do. I would like you to come on board with me.
Beautiful.
But I'm standing my ground when I need to do something. I'm not acquiescing on, like when I feel that sense of leave now. I'm not going to be like, leave now, and it's like and someone says no, and I'm like, oh, we should leave it longer, I would have said, no, I'm leaving now.
Beautiful.
Are you coming with
Yeah.
me? So that, and what you described definitely happens as well. But I think also I'm hearing it's the gift of saying, when I know, I just have to stand my ground is
Yes, you
important
do.
for me, and say, would you like to come along with me? This is where I'm walking to or driving to,
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's excellent.
It's
very helpful.
beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the piece on the plate, well, for example,
It's a spill plate. Cool.
it's a spilled plate. What's the worst thing that can happen? So that's then the other thing, right? Like it's not, if it were just a plate, okay, we just clean it up.
It's,
But even in that scenario you pointed to, what's the worst thing that can happen?
the carpet gets dirty, you clean it up. I use that one as an example where I realize those moments when because sometimes I think, oh, that could happen, and you know, it's not a big deal, but there's moments where like, if I don't move this, that's going to happen. And anytime I ignore that, it happens. And when I do, again, we never know what the other path could have happened. Maybe it wouldn't have. But there's a sense where if I feel sitting here deep there that I need to do something, the plate's just a representation of anything else in life, where it's like, I'm called to do this. I must do this. I'm going to keep doing it because I've just had too many instances where I'm like, why didn't I listen? It wasn't the mind going, maybe I should. It was the deep-seated knowing that you must do this, and when I didn't, I regretted it.
So that's the key right there.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that there is this deep-seated kind of, I'm going to equate it to a second key. It rises up.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that's coming, is something that is like a natural response or natural reaction or startle or something. And we can follow it. But be careful, because what I heard you say too is like you felt that and then the mind started saying something about it. The mind started saying, if you don't do something, this is going to happen. And then when you didn't do something, then you go, see, I told you, something happened, right? So I want you to start to see, you've got that sense of something rising up in you, and I want you to start to see when your mind comes in to manage and control and make sense of that. I would be curious, and I invite you all to feel that rising up and don't touch it. Don't touch it. Now, let me just say this. If it's something that is like life or death, you know, biology will like, done, instinct, right? But mostly it's not. It's just that natural fight or flight response that rises up based on a perceived something that's going to happen, and we respond. And I'm inviting you to be curious and explore that rising up that happens, and don't touch it. And just see what happens, and don't touch it.
Don't move the plate, meaning don't touch
Don't
it, or
move the
don't
plate.
touch it with the mind.
Don't move it with the hand, and don't move it with the mind.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Whenever
With-
I do that,
And then don't regurgitate how bad you feel about not doing it.
oh, okay.
The conscious choice is like, I see this rising up, I'm not going to touch it. I see it rising up, I'm not going to touch it. Because the first reaction is free if you
Yeah.
use it to be free, and that's
Isn't the point of intuition to guide us and say you need to walk this way?
Not
or it's like
necessarily.
listen to the voice that said leave now. Because if I didn't listen to that, I wouldn't miss the ferry, right?
so.
It's clear.
Yeah, but maybe something crazy good would have happened with missing the ferry.
Yeah, you never know. Something crazy good might have happened. So, but
Good point. Good point.
yeah. But with that experience that you pointed to from the concert, there was no doubt, hesitation, question. It was an absolute yes.
Yeah, right.
Whereas the other times I've heard you describe it, there is something that's not quite, you even said that you regret it, so that you gave it to the mind. You said that, well, if I don't do this,
Oh,
right?
it's after the fact, after the plate falls. Or literal examples, seeing glasses on the bed
Mm-hmm.
and thinking, I should move those. And then 10 minutes later, oh shit, I sat on my glasses and broke them. And I'm like, why did I knew I should have moved them? This sort of thing happens to me all the time, and now when it does, I move them. It's not that my mind's going, oh, if I don't, this could break or whatever. It's that leave now type thing. It's
Right.
so solid.
Mm-hmm.
I just listen to it. I move it. Like don't, every time, I don't, people have this experience, every time I don't, the thing I vision happening happens. The glasses get broken, the plate falls. I miss the fairy.
prophecy.
But always
It
and never
feels
is
like
like,
that. It feels like
when you live in always and never, I don't know, that's just, it's so curious to me, always and never, that place. I don't know, I'm just saying, it's a very interesting place to be. I've been there, the always and never place, but anyway.
Always and never are not accurate, right? They're not accurate because something isn't always like this and something is never like this. It's not accurate. That's like black or white. Kind of sounds like duality, right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to distinguish the difference between when there's a thought about, oh, that could happen if that doesn't get moved, and a move that or that's going to break this solid.
So that's why I want you to explore it, that rising up so you get laser light clear on when it is actually that prompt and when it's just simply a startled.
Right.
I want you to get laser light clear
Okay.
because that's going to help you.
Okay.
It's going to help us all,
Thank you.
right? To help us not actually go into the unconscious reactive patterns. So we begin to peel away from that and go, oh, my old pattern was a propensity to do this, and now I notice that was actually just an unconscious propensity, an unconscious distinction or preference or movement. And when I just watch it, kind of that startle rise up and drop, and I make no choice and I just don't touch it, then that begins to fall away and it doesn't even show up in my life anymore. Because it doesn't, nothing, got nothing.
Can I put one little more twist
Yeah.
on this? Because, from a legal mind, right? Like my
From a
father
legal
was
mind, yes.
lawyer. My father is a lawyer.
Go from the legal mind, let's hear
Read
it.
everything before you sign.
Legal
Yeah.
intuition.
Well, no, here's something that equates to this, but from a legal perspective. Because
Okay.
and then I'm curious to take on it. But if you're in a parking lot and you're backing up, and someone else is backing up toward you, and then they hit you, and if it's determined you could have stopped them by honking or something, you have a degree of culpability. Because your sense is, some people are like, oh, well, they might see me, they might stop. Honk the damn horn, and then they'll stop. If you don't, I feel that you're contributing to that impact because they're unaware and you're involved, you're going to get hit. And honking the horn might prevent the accident. I don't know if you can see the
So
parallel here,
totally. It comes back to the circle of influence is
Right.
here, right? So you are free to choose any action.
Right.
Totally free.
So if you don't honk and they hit you,
They hit you. If you honk and they hit you, they hit you. Right?
yeah.
Neither here nor there. But if you are unconscious and you don't see that they're going to hit you, then you may not honk.
Right,
Or
right.
maybe you are seeing that they're going to hit you and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do. Right. Should I honk? Should I not honk? What if they're going to stop? They're not going to stop? I don't know. Right? And then that natural response of, they're going to hit me, honk, and then that's it. Like that's that reaction. That's that first reaction is free. First reaction is free if you use it to be free. So that's a natural reaction, but the decision making around it, or then the after effects, oh thank God I honked my horn because then they didn't hit me and that would have been terrible, and how would I even gone home and told my partner that I dented the car and we don't have the money for this. That is all second reaction, projection, right? So coming back to that instinct that you're asking about. So if there's any question about it, that's mind. If it's absolutely direct, move the glasses, just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah. If it's, as you described in your relationship about something that happened around the building, you feel something rise up, just check it. Just check it. Where is this coming from? Just check it, because there sometimes is that juiciness underneath there that will reveal to you something you can't see for yourself. Right? And I know I keep looking at John and speaking to this, but I'm speaking to all of us. myself included. I do this all the time. I check myself. I feel something rise up and go, I'm just going to sit in that for a minute. I'm just going to, just like I did the other night. I just felt it come up. I'm like, I know what my propensity would be, and I'm just going to hang out here and see what happens next. Can I stay with this? And it came and it went. I didn't get hooked. I didn't have a reaction. I might have burnt a little bit of tapas, you know. But even without that desire or anticipation of having that be a reward, just that moment of just like, I felt like I was in the ocean. I went, and I fell asleep. So just, I really encourage that for you, because those opportunities are happening throughout the day, right? It's not just a big thing, it's happening all the time. And the more you pay attention, the more you'll see it, and then you can begin to recognize that. And so you can play with that toleration point, or you can just feel that second key, startle, and just notice what happens next.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So grateful.
It's good, isn't it? Let's check what time it is. Okay. Anything else?
No.
You could whisper it in Leslie's ear. No, there must be something. Anything, even something, well, I can't ask that, that seems ridiculous. That's not you saying that. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Or us about you a little bit, so we know you a little.
I'm a student. I've been a student for way too long. I'm ready to not be a student anymore. And then I can join my husband in Australia.
Wonderful.
So, I've been dealing with a lot of the overwhelm. Because there's so many things that are coming up in my life that I need to deal with, and I found it really helpful to think of the biting off one thing at a time.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a really good reason that I came today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is so useful for me right now.
That's so good.
And to put that in perspective, it just feels a lot more manageable now.
Yeah.
I feel like once I get back to Vancouver, I can kind of look at what I can do immediately, and the list was a very good example.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that recently, and it's helpful when I think of doing that, because lots of times I don't, and I just get overwhelmed,
Right.
and then I break down, and but if I just think of what I can do next that would be most helpful, then all the rest of the little bites come easy. So it's not very much a question.
Well, you shared with us what touched you, and the piece that actually was like an arrow for you that hit the target of little nugget you can take home with you.
And that would have been something I probably would have liked to have asked, but it was just presented so succinctly.
Perfect.
I'm really grateful for that.
And I'm going to encourage you not to wait until you get home.
Okay.
I'm going to encourage you
that's a good
to start practicing, what's the next thing right now, right? So even tonight, as we sit in our circle and we wrap this up, and there's what's the next thing? Walking out the door, or getting into the car. So then that becomes, it's not, you don't have to wait for it. It's happening right now. So just that. And then that becomes more familiar, because remember, we're going from the known of how we always are to the unknown. Right? And so because we're heading to the unknown, we don't know what it is, right? So we have to cultivate that capacity to be with what is unknown. And then the unknown eventually becomes the known, but we have to keep resetting. We have to keep resetting. Not resetting in the known, but we have to keep resetting in the unknown. And eventually the unknown is the familiar, and the known is the unfamiliar. Does that make sense to you? So coming back to what you were speaking about, that feeling or the sense that you had about that spaciousness, detached, disassociated, I don't even know if you use that word, but that detached feeling of through meditation, that's the unknown. So the more often you go there, the more it becomes known. And the part of you that is, or that experience that we have around desires and propensities and familiar things that are like those, guilty pleasures, we call them, right? Those guilty pleasures. Those things that are familiar to us, then they become less of a draw. They become less of a guilty pleasure because, first of all, we don't have any mind stuff around it, right? And it's not even necessarily pleasurable anymore because we don't have, it's not coming from the desire of the biology, right? So it kind of falls away. So then that becomes the unfamiliar because we're not entangled anymore. And this unknown now becomes the known. So the practice is really important. Yeah, I can't stress, I've been practicing for 25 years. So just keep practicing, and, poco, little by little, right? Yeah.
Still with the exact next thing that's
Yeah.
right here.
Exactly. It's beautiful. Yeah. So just a couple minutes. Does anyone have anything else that they want to ask or speak to?
I was gonna ask something, but you kind of already answered it, which is usually what happens. But I was along the lines of Jen, where there was that weekend with Padma meditation, and then straight into 2 weeks of yoga nidra training, and it was wonderful. I was like in this bliss state, and fortunate for me that I was able to do that. But it literally took me like a few days to come down off my high. Not that I wanted to or needed to, but it's just, and I think I mentioned it to you directly, like it didn't seem like a parasympathetic like overload, like, oh, I'm listless, but it was like, okay, now like I need some fire, right? And so what I realized is like that's the new reset, like that's the new state, the base, the homeostasis, right? Where you can be like in blissful and relaxed and easygoing, and when things come up, like so anyway, I think for me it's trying to find that balance, right? Like because I need my fire because I got stuff to do, and as part of who I am, but also just finding that balance is I don't know if it was exactly because you went like a little bit of a different direction, but so you were coming back to the ego, right? But not allowing the ego to self-serve, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if.
I guess maybe trying to find where that new balance point is.
Yeah.
Because it's shifted.
Yeah.
So it does shift. You're right. Those 10-day immersions, they're purposeful. All of the Amrit programs are purposeful of 10-day immersions because it starts to rewire us, right? It purposely starts to rewire us because we change our patterns, our routines in even just 10 days, right? That starts to happen. So then what happens, as you pointed out, you have this sense of a homeostasis. It's a balance, but it doesn't feel balanced because it's not how you normally feel. It feels out of balance. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So then you're like, okay, my God, I need some fire. I need to shake myself up here, right? I need to get myself going because I feel out of balance, even though that might be the balance. Okay, so there's that. And then the other piece is that maybe it is a little bit more parasympathetic, right? So maybe we do need a little bit of fire to bring a little bit more balance, but not the kind of balance where we swing, but actually just that polarity that we were talking about. So maybe we might be on we'll say the bottom edge of that polarity instead of the top edge. And so bring enough enough fire in just to elevate that kind of balance point. So it's a little bit more in the engaged area as opposed to the relaxed area, right? But we're not going into the contraction, right? And we're not going into the collapse. So what happens is that through the posture of consciousness, so through all the Amrit programs, because as you know, they're all about energy, but specifically the posture of consciousness, which is those 26 or 28 poses that we've been practicing over the last weekend, it's bringing our Ida and Pingala into balance, right? The male and the female into balance, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic into balance, so that we are resting at polarity. That's the intention. So we're resting at polarity, not resting, but we're established in that polarity, right? And then prana itself has been freed up. It's been magnified, amplified, and it's been freed up. So then it actually is that fire. So we don't have to go get it. It's actually there. It's actually there. And so then what happens is, but mind gets in there and goes, oh my God, I'm so lazy right now. I've just had 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever the amount of time is, and I'm like completely having a different experience than what I'm familiar with. And so I need to do something so that I can go back there. Ego is like, I don't like this. I don't like this new me. I want to go back to the old me because that one I know. So I need to do what I need to do to get back there, right? But in actuality, you're in perfect polarity.
I didn't actually want to go back because I really liked where I was. I was just like, okay, I want this.
How do I make dinner?
Yeah.
And then how do I actually do the laundry? So it's just the next thing.
Laundry?
The next thing.
Yeah.
The next thing. Yeah. But that freed up energy will then come in and it will guide, it will show us, it will like give us what we need, and then we'll become a little more sensitive to energy. So we'll have like a burst of energy, and then we'll like drop into Yoga Nidra. Right? Does that happen to anybody? Yeah.
I think that this saying about the bandwidth in a slightly different way just now, and saying it earlier, it just really, like, it's very good way of conceptualizing the energy, right? Like, it's like, okay, you know, we want to be in polarity, but yeah, so, but there's, it's not just one thing, right? Like, it's not just this or that. It's like, it's in flow, because we're never, like I think I said the other day, it's like we're never really still, or, you know, that idea that nothing is ever really just that.
Right.
Right? So having that bandwidth to play with is like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's a nice visualization or a nice metaphor for deepening the understanding. So thank you.
And that, you're welcome. And that flows throughout the day, right? Like, I know it's hard for me to get out of bed.
And you're talking prana.
Yeah, we're talking prana, yeah.
And what about kundalini?
Well, prana and kundalini are the same
Same
thing,
thing,
right?
yeah.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the tube has been, a lot of the clogs have been removed, that prana feels like kundalini, and it's moving more freely through the tube, right?
That's much
Yeah, much calmer. It's, you know, more clear thinking, less questioning this or that. It's like those. There's not even like, yeah. It's just like the insights come, boom, that's it. Move on to the next thing, right? Write that list down, boom, move on to the next thing. It's just like that. There's not a lot of chitta around it. There's not a lot of confusion around it. It's just clear because we're clear. Right, Satya?
Absolutely.
Moksha, do you have anything back there in the corner?
Well, I think that all of this stuff that has just been discussed has been really helpful, just to bring awareness back to, you know, I think it's all stuff that most of us have heard before, but each time we hear it, it lands, not each time, but often will land differently.
Mm-hmm.
And just great to be reminded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I sent a letter to Gurdev, just really appreciating, you know, the connection we had, and we had a darshan for our teacher training last Sunday, and just the connection that he pulled into that for us as we were like, it was live stream, it was the one that was, you know, on Facebook, and just appreciating that, and how I spoke about some of my personal struggles over the last little while, and how I see the residue that's kind of come to the surface for me, some things that were unresolved, some things that were contracted, and how through the last few months I've been able to see that residue and many different things, like all kinds of different things going, oh wow, I didn't even know, and there, and then there, and is quite fascinating because it's pretty calm waters for me typically. But over the last few months, it hasn't been so calm. It's been kind of murky and mucky and stuff. And so what's been interesting about that is that the constant reset of coming back to the teachings. So picking up a book, reading, writing, maybe word for word what it says on a piece of paper, or a slight variation under my understanding of what it's saying, right? So it can anchor, or listening to darshan, or some video via the web, right? Being together in class and having, you know, these kind of discussions, chanting, meditating, yoga nidra, getting on my mat and moving my body. I mean, these are all being conscious of what I'm putting in my body. And I'm not saying for a second that I'm like the healthiest eater in the world, because I'm not. I just ate a whole bunch of chips yesterday and had some ice cream. So, you know, and some wine.
Together.
But what I'm saying is that it's like paying attention to what happens. So when I eat potato chips, how does my body feel, right? I'm not judging, you know, going, oh damn, why did I do that? Just like, oh, that's interesting. Look at that. I feel a little bit more contraction, a little bit more inflammation, right? Or when I'm not, when I don't exercise, what do I notice? More lethargy. I don't have that sense of energy moving through the tube in the same way, right? If I don't get a good night's sleep, how do I feel in the morning? Like I need someone to springboard me out of bed because I don't want to get up. I just want to nestle in there and sleep more, right? I'm just tired, mentally, physically, and emotionally, right? I don't have the same tolerance. So just seeing those pieces and attending to those simple practices that affect my biology, and that resetting, just keep resetting in sadhana. That's what I shared with him. It's like, I just keep resetting in sadhana because that actually sustains me instead of keeps me bound, right? So every time I go, oh look, I'm eating potato chips, or, you know, oh look, I'm caught in some kind of a mental samskara of vritti that's not serving. Let me turn my attention to a mantra. Let me turn my attention to reading. Let me turn my attention to moving my body. Let me turn my attention to maybe service, right? All of that is really, really powerful and helpful. So I do it all the time. That's what's happening for me all the time. Always. Always.
Except when you're eating chips.
Except when I'm eating chips. Then I'm pretending I'm somebody else. Shall we sit together for a bit? Another amazing evening with you. Just beautiful, beautiful satsang. Each satsang is more rich than the one before. That's what it feels like. And as the hands part just a little bit, allow the hands to begin to move towards the face. Rest the fingertips on the eyelids. And feel the skin boundary of the face as it almost reaches out to touch the skin boundary of the hands. And wipe the face and down the body. And bring the hands to the heart. So the satsang that we have together is like a gathering of truth seekers wanting to know the eternal truth. And as I work with Gurudev and Kamini and Chandrakant, they shine the flashlight about 4 feet ahead of me, or maybe further, but I might only be able to see 4 feet ahead, based on where I am at and that level of understanding and experience. And so the intention for me is also to shine the light for you just 4 feet ahead of you, so you can see just a little further down the path, illuminating. As we all walk together. Psst, go this way. Let's chant the sound of Om. Let's take a deep breath in. Jai Bhagwan. Have a beautiful night. So grateful you joined us. Yeah.